Brandon and Brandon here, and today we're going to be covering my personal warm-up for the bench press. The first thing we're going to do is we're actually talk about what we're actually trying to get better at within the bench press starting position. So we'll go ahead and get in a position here.
As Brandon's getting set up here, we're going to try and get him into like his starting position, and he's already done a little bit of a warm-up, so this isn't necessarily like a before and after that we're going to show you, but we're going to talk through the various segments of the bench press that Brandon personally warms up for his own bench pressing success. One of the primary things, and Brandon's going to correct me anywhere here because this is his own warm-up, but the first thing that we're really looking at is improving thoracic mobility and thoracic positioning. We're going to use a drill specifically for that. We're also going to be using a drill to generally warm up the shoulders and gain a little bit of shoulder traction and scapular movement. And finally, we are actually going to warm up the hips here. So we're going to be looking at achieving full hip extension and hip external rotation for the bench press, because if you don't get full hip extension, the only place that you're going to find primary your arch coming from in the bench press is likely to be your lumbar spine, and you're probably also going to be someone then who pops your hips up off of the bench. So we're going thoracic spine, we're going shoulder kind of traction, and then we're going hip extension and hip external rotation. Did I cover all that, Brandon?
Absolutely.
Cool. The first drill Brandon's going for here is going to be a band snatch, or kind of like a band shoulder dislocation, depending on who you ask what it's called. That's like a pretty light band, but it's not that light. There's going to be a decent amount of resistance here. Brandon's going to anchor it at his feet, and now what he's actually trying to do is gain a little bit of stability at that shoulder while working through a fairly full range of motion relative to the bench press. So if we were warming up for a different exercise, we might do this one a little bit differently, but this one's going to be useful for the bench because we can really work on using his scapulas to move his arm, which is super, super important here. So we're actually working through full scapular depression in this exercise. We're not just kind of moving in and out, and trying to warm up the shoulders. He's being very intentional with his scapular positioning as it relates to bench pressing with this drill. Anything to add there, Brandon, or what's next?
Yeah, real quick, one thing I would add is I like to make my grip closer as I do this and also keep constant tension. A lot of individuals will, for one, never make this any harder. Pull apart the top and close their grip a little bit to make it a little tougher. But on top of that, I also like constant tension here. So we're not going to come all the way down to here necessarily, but starting back up about there, being very controlled through that top range.
Cool. Next one, shoulder rock.
Yes.
Now we're going to work a similar pattern here, and I'm going to back up a little bit. I don't want to get nailed. But we're going to work a similar pattern as Brandon just achieved, but we're going to do it a little bit more dynamically and apply just a little bit more athleticism to that pattern. It's also just a general warm-up for the shoulder girdle. Go ahead, Brandon. Key notes here is that Brandon is not moving his hips. He's keeping his torso pretty stiff. That's going to allow his shoulders to work through a full motion. If he were to move his hips, it's actually going to take away from the work that his shoulders are actually doing. So again, we're trying to build a little bit of general tissue warming up in this position and in this drill. And then we're actually going to transition out of it as soon as Brandon's done like 15, 20, maybe even 30 reps sometimes. Any other reasons you do that one, Brandon?
No, I really like that one quite a bit. The one thing I always like to make certain that we're doing, especially for the bench press, is we're pulling down in between reps. Initiate the following rep, but also to get more out of the lat.
Your shoulders are probably just going to feel a little bit better going into this. So even if the shoulder rock doesn't bias a specific position, it's probably just going to make your shoulders feel good, which is important for better bench pressing. The next one, and this is actually one of my personal favorite warm-ups that I do and I have athletes do, and that is a thoracic mobility drill on the ultimate back roller. Now, really, really important for this drill, guys, you have to use a super heavy band here, and the band's actually going to anchor your position. So you're going to hold that band with a lot of tension. You can't use a light band here. You're going to anchor your position. Hips are on the ground, the roller's at mid-back, and you're going to pull around that roller as hard as possible while pressing the band down slightly. You don't have to do a full tricep extension with the band, but we need a lot of tension there. What we're trying to do is to arch through this section of Brandon's spine. He's actively trying to push his sternum to the ceiling, and this is most effective with the contract relax format, maybe like a 5 to an 8 count hold, and with like a 5 to an 8 count relax, at which point he's going to try and go a little bit deeper on the next rep. So really, really important that we maintain actually probably a little bit of a brace here too, Brandon, so that we don't just bias lumbar extension. We're really trying to get the most out of the upper back in this position. What do we have next? Is that it?
Lastly, shin box get up.
Shin box get up, that's right. The
So-
final one.
So everybody misses the lower body in the bench press. The way I like to talk about it a lot is that the better your bench press starting position is, the more extensive your warm-up needs to be and the more specific your warm-up needs to be. If you're somebody, classic commercial gym bodybuilder, something like that, laying flat as a pancake, you probably don't need much out of your lower body. But for us powerlifters, trying to bench press as much as we can, we need quite a bit out of our lower body and even our T-spine.
I would actually say this is an often overlooked drill or area of a bench press warm-up. A lot of people will focus just on the shoulders or like the pecs, opening the pecs, things like that. But actually getting your hips into a stable position is crucial for better leg drive. You want to show them what it looks like there, Brandon? Now we have a full tutorial on this specific exercise, and I would highly recommend looking it up on our video library, which is going to be on kabukistrength.com. But Brandon's really going to use this as like a left to right hip assessment as well. So we're really trying to gauge the internal rotation range that one hip has over the other and the external rotation that one hip has over the other. And from here, he's being very intentional to use his glutes to stabilize his position on both ends, both on the hip flexion side of it and the hip extension side of it. How many reps and sets do you do here, Brandon?
Typically always a 5-count eccentric, nice and slow in the eccentric, anywhere from 10 to 15 per side, but it's very often that I end up doing a second set, or if I feel like my hips need a little additional work, we may even add in a hip airplane or something of that nature. But yeah, 1 to 2 sets, 10 to 15 per side, slow eccentric.
Yep. And I would say Brandon doesn't really have any real weaknesses in his bench press from a positioning standpoint. He's a super technical lifter, so what we just went through here is a great warm-up for anyone who's not really sure where to start in their bench press, because we're not just working on like bottom position or just leg drive or just locking out weights. This was a very global warm-up sequence to cover many, many different aspects of the bench press. Anything else to add there, Brandon?
Yeah, like I mentioned before, lower body is always a forgotten component within the bench press. To get in a better bench press position, it should be somewhat uncomfortable, but also it should be taxing for the lower body and something that you actually need to work to get into better position within. So make sure that we're paying attention to not only our shoulder girdle, but also our T-spine, also our lower body, and adapting to the needs of your bench press position.
And Brandon won't say it, but I will. You should probably listen to him because he bench presses 500 pounds. Brandon signing out.